We open on a dimly lit hallway in a large and opulent manor. The camera glides silently over polished dark wood and towering shelves of dark artifacts. A house elf scrubs the floor on his hands and knees, his large ears twitching nervously. Suddenly, voices behind the door grow louder and louder, and the elf freezes. We can't make out exactly what is being said, but we do hear two words: Harry Potter. The elf's eyes widen in horror, and the camera pushes in on his face as he realizes something terrible is being planned. With a gasp, the elf snaps his fingers and disappears with a deafening crack that echoes through the hall. We cut to black, and the title sequence is cued. Now, it was pretty common for the first few books, I think up to book 4, to open with a description of Harry and a recap of his backstory, his appearance, the fact he's a wizard and that he goes to Hogwarts, etc, etc. And I don't think the show needs to do this. I don't even really know how they would do it without it coming across pretty cheesy and over the top. However, after the title sequence, we will open with a slow pan through Harry's room at Privet Drive, with the camera passing over spellbooks, robes, the Nimbus 2000, and Hedwig in her cage. The shot ends with Harry looking at himself in the mirror, finishing up getting changed that morning, and he brushes his hair out of his eyes, revealing his lightning scar. This is a nice way to recap Harry's character without using over-the-top narration like in the book. We then see Harry go downstairs to join the Dursleys for breakfast, and we get the scene with Uncle Vernon raging to Harry about Hedwig hooting in the night, and Harry pleading with him to let Hedwig out of her cage. Dudley then tells Harry to pass the bacon, and we get the incredible moment from the book where Harry says, "You've forgotten the magic word," which prompts outrage from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, and Dudley falls spectacularly off his chair. I really want the show to continue to emphasise the Dursleys' reaction to magic, especially with Dudley, as they never properly explored just how terrified of magic he is. The Dursleys then proceed to discuss their plans for their dinner party that evening, similar to the movie, however this time it's at breakfast, and afterwards Harry goes outside. We then get one of my favourite moments from any of the books, where Harry pretends to set a bush on fire in front of Dudley by saying a bunch of gibberish. I love this moment because it really highlights how Harry in the books was incredibly quick-witted and quite cheeky. It's a characteristic I really wished was in the movies more, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of it in the TV show. Harry is then punished for this, and we get a montage of him doing various chores around the house, such as cleaning the windows, washing the car, and mowing the lawn. The montage ends with him sitting on the lawn before seeing a pair of green eyes staring out of a bush at him. Before Harry can investigate, however, Aunt Petunia calls him back inside and up to his room before the dinner party starts. We then get the introduction of Dobby waiting for Harry in his room, and the rest of the scene plays out pretty much identically to the movie, with Dobby warning Harry not to go back to Hogwarts, revealing that he's been stopping Harry's letters from reaching him, and culminating in the race downstairs before Dobby levitates Aunt Petunia's pudding, smashing it on the floor and covering Harry in whipped cream and sugared violets. Sequence 1 of the episode ends with Harry covered in pudding, in shock, and we see Dobby in the background vanish with a crack. Before we go on, please remember to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and hit the notification bell. I'm so excited that we're now bringing season 2 to life, and it will really help me out if you can do these things. Sequence 2 of the episode opens with Harry still covered in pudding, mopping up the kitchen, and as the camera pans round, we see the Dursleys in the living room with the Masons trying to repair all of the damage. It looks to be working at first before an owl swoops into the living room and drops the letter on Mrs. Mason's head. Mr. and Mrs. Mason scream and run from the house before Uncle Vernon picks up the letter, rips it open, and reads it. I want to include this moment as the movies never actually highlighted the fact that Harry got an official warning from the Ministry of Magic for using a hover charm in the second book. And it is something that is later brought up in the third and fifth books, the latter of which being used to almost expel Harry from Hogwarts. It also serves as a way to change the dynamic slightly between the Dursleys and Harry, as from this point forward they're not quite as terrified of him. After getting Harry to read the letter aloud, Uncle Vernon then proceeds to lock Harry in his room and apply the bars on his window. And the next thing we see is a very peculiar dream sequence. Harry dreams that he's in a zoo exhibit with people pressing their noses up against the bars at him like Dobby and Dudley, before he opens his eyes and sees Ron in a flying car staring through the bars. One feature of the books that I really enjoy is these bizarre dreams, sometimes nonsensical ones, sometimes the darker ones like the glimpses into Voldemort's mind. So hopefully with more time and budget, we will see more of these featured in the show. We then have the escape from the Dursleys scene, which will be very similar to the movie, with Uncle Vernon trying and failing to stop Harry escaping in the car. Once they're in the air, we'll get a short conversation with Harry explaining why he wasn't replying to Ron's letters, all about Dobby and his warning. And after the conversation, we'll transition into some beautiful shots of the car flying over rural England, with the sky becoming lighter and lighter as dawn approaches. The scene then ends with the arrival at the Burrow, very similar to the movie with a sketchy landing. Harry exits the car and marvels at the bizarre house before...
"Ah," said Fred. "Oh dear," said George.
We see Mrs. Weasley standing in the door to the Burrow, looking furious, which brings Sequence 2 to a close. Sequence 3 covers the rest of Chapter 3 of the book, plus a little bit of Chapter 4 in order to allow Season 2, Episode 1 to end on a cliffhanger. The sequence opens with the camera panning through the Burrow, seeing all of the different Weasley oddities, such as the clock, magical household books, and the Wizarding Wireless playing Celestina Warbeck. The camera then moves into the kitchen, where we see Mrs. Weasley screaming herself hoarse at Ron and the twins. And after this, I really want to see the de-gnoming the garden scene. It's one of my favourite moments from this book, and I think leaving gnomes out completely from the movies was a real shame. Also, I think it's major nostalgia from the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets game. That part of the game was so janky, but still a lot of fun. After the de-gnoming scene, Harry, Ron, Fred and George head back into the kitchen, and we get the introduction to Mr. Weasley, who hopefully is balding and bespectacled like described in the books, and after breakfast, Ron takes Harry up to his room. On the way upstairs, they catch a glimpse of a pair of bright brown eyes staring out of a door that suddenly slams shut as they walk past. Ron informs Harry that that was Ginny as they are stepping into Ron's room, and finally, we will get to see Ron's room in all its glory. We'll see the Chudley cannons plastered all over the walls, a pile of comics featuring the adventures of Martin Miggs, the Mad Muggle, self-shuffling playing cards, and a fish tank full of frog spawn. Harry grins at Ron and says it's the best house he's ever been in, before we move into a montage covering Harry's next few days at the Burrow, including playing Quidditch with Ron, Fred and George, and discussing Muggle inventions with Mr. Weasley. The episode will then move into its climax scene. During breakfast one morning, Hogwarts letters arrive for Harry, Ron, Fred, George, Percy and Ginny. The letters include the book lists they will need that year, and they make a note of the fact that it includes 8 Gilderoy Lockhart books. We then cut to the Weasleys and Harry stood around the fireplace, ready to use flue powder to get to Diagon Alley. Mrs. Weasley hands Harry a flower pot full of powder, explaining how to use it. Fred and George demonstrate before Harry steps into the fire, scattering the powder and coughing out Diagon Alley through a mouthful of ash. The journey is chaotic, with Harry spinning around and around through emerald green flames, catching glimpses of random fireplaces, living rooms, kitchens as he is zooming past them. When he finally crashes out, it's not into the warmth of Diagon Alley, but onto the cold stone floor in a dark and eerie shop filled with sinister objects like a withered hand, blood-stained cards, and sinister masks. Realizing he's completely lost, Harry tries to slip out unnoticed, only to spot Draco Malfoy and his father approaching the shop. Covered in soot, with broken glasses and no way to escape, Harry freezes in fear and shock. We cut to black, and the credits roll on episode 1. We open with an advert reminiscent of old-timey TV and radio ads. Obviously there are no TVs in the Wizarding World, so this would most likely be a Wizarding Wireless advert. However, we will see some visuals that go along with it. We see a handsome man grinning at the camera wearing bright blue robes as a voice introduces us to Gilderoy Lockhart, the renowned author, Order of Merlin 3rd class holder, and 5 times winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. The voice informs us of his many achievements in the line of defense against the dark arts, and he will be appearing at Flourish and Blotts later that day to sign copies of his autobiography, Magical Me. Gilderoy Lockhart winks at the camera, flashes those bright white teeth. We cut to black to cue the title sequence. We then cut to Harry in fear and shock as Draco Malfoy and his father prepare to enter Borgin and Burke's. Harry wheels around and spots a large cabinet which he instantly hops inside of. I really want the show to linger slightly on the exterior of this cabinet, as we actually know that it will be the same vanishing cabinet that appear in both the 5th and 6th books, the latter of which being an integral part of the story. It doesn't need to be explicit in exactly what the cabinet is, but again it's just a nice little Easter egg for fans to see, knowing how important that will be in a later season. Harry then listens to the conversation between the Malfoys, and I really want the show to include this conversation as it shows a side to Draco that we never got to see in the movies. Basically, him being a whiny little git. We see Draco complaining about the fact that he isn't on the Quidditch team when he inspects the Hand of Glory, which provides light to only the holder, something that will become pretty important in a later season, and he complains about the teachers all having favourites, including Hermione. In the movies, we saw him being a bully and a coward, but we never really got to see any interaction between him and his parents, and it's something that the show will hopefully include more of. Harry then witnesses Lucius selling his objects to Mr. Borgin, which was actually a deleted scene from the Chamber of Secrets movie, and this scene will play out very similar to that deleted scene. Once Lucius and Draco leave the shop, Harry exits as well and finds himself in Longtime Alley. And I really want the show to develop this area a little bit more than what we saw in the Chamber of Secrets and Half-Blood Prince movies. In these movies, we only really saw a couple of small dark alleyways, and I really want the show to develop it even more. The rest of the scene then plays out very similar to the movie, with Hagrid finding Harry, bringing him to Diagon Alley and meeting up with the Weasleys and Hermione. Mr. Weasley then proceeds to go and have a drink with Hermione's parents as they're muggles, and the rest of the gang all head to Gringotts. We see a very quick sequence of the Gringotts cart ride down to the vaults, and Harry uncomfortably watches Mrs. Weasley opening her very empty vault and sweeping the entire contents into her bag. After Gringotts, we'll then see a montage of Harry, Ron and Hermione going around Diagon Alley to pick up their various school supplies before they head to Flourish and Blotts. As they arrive at the bookshop, they see that it is heaving with people, and they notice a sign outside saying,
Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, 12:30 to 4:30 p.m.
The rest of the scene plays out exactly like the movie, with Lockhart spotting Harry, presenting him with his entire works of books, and announcing that he will be the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. Afterwards, they bump into Draco Malfoy, who they have a cold conversation with, before Lucius Malfoy arrives and Mr. Weasley. We then have the incredible moment from the book where Lucius Malfoy and Mr. Weasley have a massive fight in the bookshop after Lucius insults the book that Ginny is holding. The fight knocks over bookshelves, people scream, and the twins shout, "Get him, Dad!" Hagrid pulls the two apart. Lucius furiously thrusts the books back at Ginny, and him and Draco storm out of the shop. Sequence 1 of the episode then ends with the Weasleys walking back to the Leaky Cauldron, with Fred saying,
"He was pleased. Didn't you hear him as we were leaving? He was asking that bloke from the Daily Prophet if he'd be able to work the fight into his report. Said it was all publicity."
We cut to black to end sequence 1. Sequence 2 opens up on a frantic morning at the Burrow, with the Weasleys and Harry scrambling around as they are trying to leave for King's Cross Station. We then see some really snappy shots of the car leaving the Burrow but hastily returning to collect forgotten bits and bobs. This includes Ginny screaming that she forgot her diary. Once again, this is a nice little Easter egg that I really want the show to include, as in my opinion, Chamber of Secrets is phenomenal at laying these little breadcrumbs of clues throughout the story that you only really pick up on subsequent readings. Finally, after many return trips, the car pulls up at King's Cross Station, and the rest of the entire sequence will then play out almost identically to the movies, with just a couple of changes here and there. Harry and Ron are unable to get through the barrier. They decide to take the car and fly to Hogwarts. Obviously, the show has a lot more time to cover this sequence of events, so we will see a few more shots of Harry and Ron in the car enjoying the journey with a fat pack of toffees in the glove compartment. We'll also see some beautiful shots of the car going over the countryside, surfing over the clouds, before Harry and Ron start getting incredibly hot and tired. I don't really want the show to include the scene of Harry falling out of the car that was in the movies. I know this was done to make the whole thing more cinematic, but I would prefer the show to follow the book's approach to the journey to Hogwarts, especially as we will be getting a pretty major action scene coming up in a couple of moments. They finally arrive at Hogwarts before the car splutters and dies, before crashing into a giant tree. As Harry breathes a sigh of relief and Ron looks devastatingly at his broken wand, the tree starts to batter the car. After a few frantic moments, the engine kicks into life, Ron slams the reverse pedal, and they shoot out of the tree's reach. The car then furiously ejects Harry and Ron before shooting off into the Forbidden Forest. The sequence ends with Ron staring hopelessly at the retreating car. Sequence 3 of the episode is going to be a little bit shorter than sequence 1 and 2, as they were both fairly action-packed and long. It's essentially just going to cover the rest of chapter 5 of the book. The sequence actually starts in the Great Hall, where we see the new batch of first years nervously approaching the sorting hat. The camera pans over the heads of students sitting at the 4 house tables before it moves to a window where we see Harry and Ron with their faces pressed up against it. They discuss the fact that they can't see Snape anywhere, and as they are theorizing where he might be, they hear a cold voice behind them. They spin around, and to their horror, they see Snape smiling down at them. Snape then escorts them through the castle to the dungeons and into his office. The rest of the scene plays out like in the movie, with Snape interrogating the pair of them before Dumbledore and McGonagall arrive. After informing them that they aren't going to be expelled, but they will receive detentions and letters home, McGonagall flicks her wand and conjures up sandwiches and pumpkin juice for Harry and Ron before the 3 professors leave the office. After eating, Harry and Ron head up to the Gryffindor common room, and as the fat lady's portrait opens, they are greeted by a wall of noise from the other Gryffindors. Older students who Harry doesn't know claps him on the back and congratulates him, whilst Fred and George shout, "Why didn't you call us back?" The episode ends with a close-up on Harry's face. Unable to control himself, his face splits into a wide, grin. We cut to black to end episode 2. We then see the cold open for this episode. Similar to how in season 1 we saw excerpts from the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book when we were looking at different magical creatures, we will now see an animated page about Cornish pixies being narrated by Newt Scamander. This will be pretty brief as there is a lot to cram into this episode, but the short clip will end with Scamander saying to never let Cornish pixies loose, as they will cause chaos. The title sequence then rolls. We then open at breakfast in the Great Hall, the day after Harry and Ron's dramatic arrival at Hogwarts, and we will get the scene like in the movie, with Ron receiving the howler from Mrs. Weasley. This will actually be pretty much identical to the movie, as one thing I liked about this scene was that they ripped the letter right out of the novel, with it being word for word what was in the book. The rest of sequence 1 will then focus on Harry's first day of the new term. As I mentioned in my season 1 breakdowns, I really want the show to explore more about the student experience and different classes and daily life at Hogwarts. Obviously, as the story heats up and we follow the mystery more closely, we will run out of time for moments like this, so it's important to get these moments in early. The first class of the day is herbology, and the herbology scene will be similar to the movie, with a couple of key changes and additions. Firstly, before class, Harry is apprehended by Gilderoy Lockhart. I think Kenneth Branagh did an excellent job as Lockhart in the movies, however, I don't think we saw enough of his overall character shine through. We definitely saw him being a blithering idiot who almost fooled himself into believing he's a competent wizard, however we didn't see a great deal of just how delusional he is when it comes to his fame. This definitely comes through in this short conversation with Harry before herbology, where he suggests that he's far more famous than Harry, even though Harry is probably the most famous person in the world. As I said though, the actual herbology class itself with the mandrakes will be very similar to the movie, but we will also see the introduction of Justin Finch Fletchley, where he reveals that he's a Muggle-born, as this will become pretty important later in the season. We then move into a montage which covers the next portion of Harry's day, with him attending different classes and eating lunch, before the montage ends with the Gryffindors waiting outside the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom for their first class with Lockhart. Before they enter, however, we get the introduction to Colin Creevey, who takes a picture of Harry, asks him to sign it, before Draco Malfoy arrives to start taunting Harry, and to make matters worse, Gilderoy Lockhart then appears and leads Harry into the classroom, giving him another lecture about fame. We then have the scene with Lockhart's first class, and I honestly find this scene in the book absolutely hilarious. They did actually film this scene for the Chamber of Secrets movie, but it ended up being cut. Essentially, Lockhart hands out quiz sheets where all of the questions are about him. It's such a shame that this was deleted from the movie, as once again it kind of expands Lockhart's character even more, but the movie was incredibly long already, so I can kind of understand it. Sequence 1 then ends with a frantic action sequence, very much like the movie, when Lockhart sets a bunch of Cornish pixies free and tasks Harry, Ron and Hermione with rounding them all up. Sequence 2 of the episode opens up with Harry lying in bed. Suddenly we see Oliver Wood's face loom out the darkness with a manic expression, telling Harry to get up for Quidditch practice. We then cut to Harry arriving at the Quidditch pitch to join the rest of the team in the changing rooms, and we'll see a short scene of Oliver Wood's incredibly dry team talk, with the team all nodding off here and there, sitting in a stupor. I kind of envision this like in the History of Magic quest in Hogwarts Legacy, where the main goal of the quest is to literally just stay awake. The camera will dim in and out, with Harry struggling to keep his eyes open, before Wood suddenly tells everybody to get up and go out onto the pitch. We then see a couple of brief shots of the team training before the Slytherin team arrive. The following scene then plays out like the movie, with the reveal of Malfoy as the new Slytherin Seeker, the 7 Nimbus 2001s, and the moment with Malfoy calling Hermione a mudblood. And just like in the movie, Ron tries to hex Malfoy, but his wand backfires and he begins burping slugs everywhere. Harry and Hermione heave Ron out of the Quidditch pitch and down to Hagrid's hut. The scene in Hagrid's is once again very similar to the movie, however the show has another chance to give justice to Ron, as in the movie Hermione already knows the term mudblood. This time it's Ron who gives the explanation of what mudblood means, and he voices his concerns and opinions about pureblood supremacy, backing up Hermione in the process. After the scene in Hagrid's hut, we cut to the trio entering the castle before they are accosted by Professor McGonagall, who tells Harry and Ron what their detentions will be that evening. Harry will be helping Lockhart with his fan mail, and Ron will be helping Filch clean trophies. I really want the show to include what Ron's detention is, as in this detention, Ron will find a crucial piece of information that will become relevant later on in the season. We then cut to Harry in his detention with Lockhart, and it will be like the movie, with Lockhart droning on about his many achievements and his fame, before Harry suddenly hears a cold, sinister voice making threats. Harry asks Lockhart if he heard the voice too, and after Lockhart says he didn't hear anything, we focus on Harry's face, looking shocked and confused. We cut to black to end sequence 2. Sequence 3 of the episode features a scene that was left completely out of the movie, the Death Day party. We open with the first of this season's Hogwarts changing motifs. Similar to season 1, we will see leaves turning brown and Halloween decorations popping up around the school. We will also see a Quidditch team in the distance practicing in the rain, which then turns out to be the Gryffindor team, as we cut to Harry trudging through the castle splattered with mud, carrying his Nimbus 2000. He then bumps into nearly headless Nick, who is completely distracted by a letter he is reading, and after Harry asks him what's wrong, Nick tells him that he's been denied entry to the Headless Hunt. But before Harry can reply, Mrs. Norris comes skulking around the corner. Before Harry can escape, he is then ambushed by Filch, who is outraged about the mess Harry is causing and proceeds to take him to his office to fill out an incident report. After they enter Filch's office, we hear a huge crash on the ceiling, and Filch goes streaking out of the office, shouting about Peeves, leaving Harry alone. Harry then notices an envelope sitting on Filch's desk, and being his usual nosy self, he picks up the letter and starts to read, seeing that it is a quick spell form for failed witches and wizards. I think it's really important to include this information, as just like with the introduction to Justin Finch Fletchley, it provides crucial details as to why certain people are getting targeted throughout the season. Harry then hears Filch returning to his office and hastily throws the letter back on the table, but when Filch comes back, he suspects Harry has been reading his letter and promptly throws him out of the office. Once he leaves, Harry then sees nearly headless Nick again, and he tells Harry that he convinced Peeves to smash the vanishing cabinet, that's 2 times in 2 episodes this has been mentioned by the way, above Filch's office, so Harry could escape. Harry thanks Nick and asks him if he can do anything to help, and this is when Nick invites Harry to his Death Day party. Harry says he will go, and we then arrive at the climax scene of this episode, with a cut to the trio entering the dungeons to the party. I really want this to be the absolute standout moment of this episode, with the eeriness of the ghosts drifting around and dancing, with musical saws playing a terrifying rendition of a popular classical melody, although I'm not really sure which one. We'll definitely see the tables full of rotten food.
I expect they've let it rot to give it a stronger flavour, said Hermione knowledgeably, pinching her nose and leaning closer to look at the putrid haggis.
And Peeves zooming around causing chaos, especially when we get our first introduction to Moaning Myrtle, who promptly zooms out of the dungeon after Peeves starts pelting her with mouldy peanuts. I'm not sure if there's going to be time to actually introduce the Headless Hunt, as there's been a lot in this episode already, but I would like to see it if it is possible. The episode then reaches its climax as Harry hears that cold, sinister voice again and streaks out of the dungeon with Ron and Hermione in tow. The camera frantically follows them as they round corners and sprint up staircases before they finally burst into an empty corridor. They then see something shining in red on the wall, and as they approach, they see it is a message written in blood saying,
"The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware."
We cut to black, and the credits roll. Our cold open for this episode is a return to the more darker tone from the first episode. The camera moves close to the ground, almost like we're an animal skulking the floors of Hogwarts, and we get a variety of different reactions from students as we pass. Some look worried and scurry away, whilst others hiss and aim kicks at us. We then see whose point of view we were seeing, as the camera changes perspective and we see Mrs. Norris round a corner into an empty corridor. Suddenly the cat stops, her hair on end, hissing. We then hear the same sinister voice that Harry has been hearing, and the cat freezes, almost like it's been turned to stone. We cut to black, and the title sequence rolls. We properly open the episode exactly where we left off, with the trio standing in front of the writing on the wall, and as they edge closer, they notice Mrs. Norris hanging next to it. Before they can leave, however, the rest of the school arrives on the scene, including Malfoy, who shouts,
"Enemies of the air, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods."
Like in the movie, Filch then arrives and proceeds to accuse Harry before the rest of the staff arrive. The main difference from what we saw in the movie is that the teachers and the trio head up to Lockhart's office to inspect Mrs. Norris, and the conversation in there is slightly different as well. Dumbledore assesses Mrs. Norris, while Lockhart rambles on about his many different adventures. Snape goes on to interrogate the trio and suggests that they are lying about something, and says that he thinks Harry should be kicked off the Quidditch team until he's prepared to tell the truth. However, McGonagall jumps in to defend Harry. After all, she is a big fan of her Quidditch. I want to include this version of the scene because once again it provides good character development. However, this time it's for the teachers. Harry notes in the book that Dumbledore mutters peculiar words and makes complex wand movements, and I think it'll be really interesting to see this sort of performance from Dumbledore, as we never really got to see him doing any sort of magic really until I think the 5th movie. Eventually, Dumbledore confirms that Mrs. Norris has been petrified, shutting up Lockhart in the process, and insists that Harry wouldn't have been able to pull off that sort of dark magic. Despite Filch's outrage, who goes on to say that Harry knows he's a squib, Dumbledore dismisses the trio from Lockhart's office. As they walk back to the common room, they have a brief discussion about everything that just happened, including the voice, Mrs. Norris, the writing on the wall, and Malfoy's reaction. Ron also explains that a squib is almost like the opposite to a muggle-born, a person born to a wizarding family but without any magical abilities. We then move into a montage where once again we see Harry attending a couple of classes and moving through hallways that are packed with students. We also see the library, almost in a time lapse, with hundreds of students coming in and out checking out certain books. The montage ends with Harry and Ron doing some homework before they are joined by Hermione, who frustratingly tells them that all of the copies of Hogwarts: A History have been checked out by people wanting to research about the Chamber of Secrets. While she is saying this, Justin Finch Fletchley enters the library and, upon seeing Harry, promptly turns around and leaves instantly. Wondering what Justin's strange behaviour is about, the trio then get up and say that it's time for another class that we've never seen in the movies, History of Magic. I know History of Magic isn't the most exciting of classes, Harry notes this many times in the books, however it will still be really interesting to see it, as all of the classes in the books, regardless of how boring they might be, really bring Hogwarts to life. The class starts with Professor Binns gliding through the blackboard before beginning to drone on about the International Warlock Convention of 1289, and we see the class, one by one, slump in their seats, unable to pay attention. Binns suddenly stops as he sees Hermione with her hand up, who goes on to ask Binns about the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. Reluctantly, Binns proceeds to tell the legend of how Slytherin supposedly built a chamber underneath Hogwarts that contains a monster to purge the school of all Muggleborns. Whilst Professor Binns is talking about the origins of the Chamber of Secrets, it'll be pretty cool to see a reenactment of the founding of Hogwarts with the 4 founders, as well as their eventual dispute and Slytherin leaving Hogwarts due to the Muggleborn situation. Eventually, Binns gets sick of it, saying it's a myth, and returns to his lecture. A fade to black as the class sinks back into their usual boredom, brings sequence 1 to a close. In the movie, it is during McGonagall's class that this information is given, but as I mentioned before, I think it's a perfect opportunity to finally be introduced to Professor Binns. Sequence 2 of the episode opens with the trio leaving Binns' classroom, discussing, like the rest of the class, what he had told them regarding the Chamber of Secrets. As they walk and talk, they find themselves in the same corridor where they found the writing on the wall and decide to do some investigating. They notice scorch marks and spiders desperately scurrying to escape the castle through a window. Ron, terrified of spiders due to an incident in his childhood where Fred turned his teddy bear into a giant spider, refuses to look. They then examine the flooded area near a girl's bathroom, which Hermione identifies as Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Despite the out of order sign, they enter the bathroom and encounter Myrtle, who is melodramatic and unhelpful, revealing that she was too upset on Halloween and didn't witness the attack. As I mentioned earlier in the series, I honestly think Chamber of Secrets is an incredible whodunit mystery, and I especially love the trio essentially becoming detectives as they pick up on little breadcrumbs that will eventually come together to solve the mystery towards the end of the story. As the trio walk back to the common room, they discuss more about who they think the heir of Slytherin might be. Ron naturally accuses Malfoy, and after a brief discussion, Hermione comes up with the idea of Polyjuice potion. The only issue is the book is in the restricted section, and they will need a signed permission slip from a teacher to check it out. Hermione suggests tricking a teacher into giving the signature, and Ron says,
"Oh, come on, no teacher's gonna fall for that. They'd have to be really thick."
Cut to Gilderoy Lockhart, admiring himself in the mirror, removing his hair curlers. I really want the show to include the scene of Harry buttering Lockhart up as Lockhart asks Harry to be a werewolf in a dramatization of a portion of his book. I just love how exasperated Harry is by all of this. And once again, it just shows how ridiculously incompetent Lockhart is. After the class end, Harry, Ron and Hermione linger behind so they can try and get Lockhart's signature for the slip. Hermione approaches Lockhart, flattering him by praising gadding with ghouls and claiming she needs the book for extra research. Lockhart signs it without even glancing at the title, too busy boasting about his own achievements yet again, including an exaggerated Quidditch career, trying to give Harry tips on how to be a good seeker. We cut to the trio barricading themselves in Myrtle's bathroom with the new book. The rest of the conversation then plays out pretty much exactly like the movie, with Hermione explaining the process of how Harry and Ron will become Crabbe and Goyle, and that the potion will take a month to make. Sequence 2 ends with Ron saying,
"It'll be a lot less hassle if you can just knock Malfoy off his broom tomorrow."
Sequence 3 of the episode will be the following Quidditch match and the scene after it, and to be honest, it's pretty much identical to what we got in the movie. Some of the comments on my previous videos have raised concerns that the episodes feel a little bit short, and the way that the show should combat this, in my opinion, is by fleshing out some of the action scenes and Quidditch scenes more than the brief explanation that the books often gave. The Quidditch match will start normally before a rogue bludger starts to attack Harry. Fred and George start beating it away, and after the bludger grows more relentless, they start tailing Harry like a couple of bodyguards. This is just a small addition, but again, it's just something that will make the Quidditch scene a bit more unique from the movie and flesh it out a little bit. During the team talk, Harry asks Wood to tell Fred and George to stop following him so he can focus all of his attention on the snitch. Once the game restarts, the match then proceeds exactly like the movie, with Malfoy taunting Harry whilst being oblivious to the snitch above his head, the bludger breaking Harry's arm, and Harry eventually catching the snitch. Again, like the movie, Lockhart then arrives and tries to fix Harry's arm, but instead accidentally removes all his bones. Harry stares at his arm, which now looks like a thick, flesh-coloured rubber glove. The camera cuts to black as Harry passes out. We then reach the climax scene of the episode, which will play out almost identically to the movie. We cut to Harry suddenly waking up to find Dobby the house elf sponging his forehead. Dobby tearfully admits that he was the one who sealed the barrier at King's Cross to stop Harry from returning to Hogwarts. He also reveals that he was the one who bewitched the bludger in order to injure Harry so he'd be sent home. Dobby reveals the Chamber of Secrets has been opened before and that history is repeating itself. However, he refuses to give details and tries to punish himself whenever he says too much. Suddenly, Dobby and Harry hear footsteps outside and Dobby disappears with a loud crack, leaving Harry to lie down pretending to be asleep. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall enter the hospital wing, carrying what appears to be a lifeless statue between them. They heave it onto a nearby bed, and McGonagall whispers that the victim was found on the stairs with a bunch of grapes, lightly trying to sneak up to visit Harry. Harry slowly raises himself to glimpse the frozen figure. The petrified victim stares blankly ahead, holding a camera up to his face in shock. It's Colin Creevey. We cut to black, and the credits roll. The cold open for this episode follows the same idea from the previous episode, and it's something that I'm hoping to become kind of a motif for this season. The camera focuses on the fat lady's portrait, which slowly creaks open, and we see Colin Creevey sneak outside with a bunch of grapes. The camera follows him as he sneaks through the deserted corridors in a style that we got accustomed to in the previous season with the trio's many midnight outings. Once again, we hear that cold, sinister voice making threats. Colin stops suddenly and drops his grapes. He slowly raises his camera and turns around before freezing as if turned to stone. The title sequence then rolls. We open in the hospital wing. The camera focuses on the petrified form of Colin Creevey, then pulls back to show the grave faces of Madame Pomfrey, Professor McGonagall, and Dumbledore. This scene is crucial because it's really the first time that we see the adults getting truly rattled. Professor McGonagall isn't her usual stern, composed self. She's genuinely frightened. Dumbledore examines Colin's melted camera, confirming the chamber is open, but shifting the mystery from who to how, which is a massive story beat. It wasn't until a recent reading of Chamber of Secrets that I truly understood what this meant. Dumbledore already knows that it was Tom Riddle who opened the chamber last time, and it must be Voldemort who is behind it this time. Hence why he is asking how instead of who, as everyone assumes Voldemort to be gone. We then cut to the next morning with Harry healed, desperate to tell Ron and Hermione what he witnessed in the hospital wing. He finds them in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom as they have already started work on the Polyjuice potion. I've included this moment to show their initiative, really. They're not just waiting around, they've heard what's happened to Colin and they are getting straight down to action. But they hit a wall, the potion is incomplete and some of the ingredients can only be found in Snape's personal stores. Hermione then devises the plan. She'll do the stealing, while Harry and Ron create a diversion. I think the potions class diversion could be a real masterclass in tension and dark comedy. We need to see the real risk they're taking. Snape's dungeon is already a high-pressure environment, and causing an explosion there is stupidly dangerous. Towards the end of the class, while Snape's back is turned, Harry throws a filibuster firework straight into Goyle's cauldron. This causes absolute chaos, and it will be incredibly fun to watch, with Malfoy growing a pumpkin-sized nose and Goyle's eyes growing to the size of dinner plates. However, when Snape holds up the remains of the firework and says,
"If I ever find out who threw this, I shall make sure that person is expelled,"
he stares straight at Harry. This is another opportunity to really highlight how terrifying Snape can be, as it's something I felt was often missing slightly from the movies. As they head to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, Harry says that he's sure Snape knew it was him. However, the panic turns to excitement as when they arrive, Hermione adds the ingredients and she says it will be ready in 2 weeks. We cut to black to end Sequence 1. Sequence 2 opens up on a sign on the Gryffindor notice board saying Dueling Club tonight, 8 p.m. We then cut to the Great Hall and the whole of Harry's year is there, buzzing with excitement. The first part of the Dueling Club will be pretty much like the movie, with Lockhart delusionally boasting about his abilities before Snape humiliates him with Expelliarmus. The next part will differ largely from what we saw in the movie. Lockhart instructs all of the students to split into pairs, but before Harry can pair up with Ron, Snape comes up to them to break them up. He puts Harry with Malfoy, Ron with Seamus, and Hermione with Millicent Bulstrode. The duels are a catastrophe. Spells fly wildly, Neville and Justin Finch-Fletchley knock each other out, Ron's wand backfires on Seamus, and in a fantastic physical bit, Hermione is put into a headlock by the much larger Millicent Bulstrode. I like seeing these moments where other students are included in scenes like this because once again, it just makes the whole student experience much more believable. Panicked by the total chaos, Lockhart calls for another demo. This time, Malfoy versus Potter. Like in the book, we've already seen Harry and Malfoy do their main duel, so this mini duel is only Malfoy conjuring the snake. And unlike in the movie where we saw Harry whispering in Parseltongue, this time we will hear Harry speaking in English, although it is slightly raspy. This is more in line with the book, as Harry and the reader don't know that he's been speaking another language until Ron and Hermione's conversation later. Once the snake slumps to the floor and Snape vanishes it, Harry turns around and grins at Justin Finch-Fletchley, who looks terrified and turns around, sprinting from the Great Hall. We cut to Ron and Hermione dragging Harry into the common room where they go on to reveal what his gift is. The ability to talk to snakes is a mark of Salazar Slytherin, and now essentially the school will all think he's the heir of Slytherin. We then cut to the next day where Harry is a pariah with people scattering all around him. We follow Harry as he enters the library where he sees Ernie Macmillan convincing the other Hufflepuffs about his guilt. Harry steps out to confront them, but their minds are made up. In a fury, Harry storms out of the library and, without looking where he's going, walks straight into Hagrid, who is holding a dead rooster. Another clue, by the way. Hagrid tells Harry that he's been visiting Dumbledore because he wants to put a charm around his coop, and when Hagrid leaves, Harry continues on his way. However, again, because he isn't paying attention, he then trips headlong over something lying on the floor. He has tripped right over the petrified body of Justin Finch-Fletchley. And as he looks around, he also sees nearly headless Nick's body floating a few inches above the ground, dark and smoke-like. Before Harry can even process this, a door bangs open and out comes Peeves, who sees Harry, Justin and Nick, and his face splits into a wicked grin.
Attack! Attack! Another attack! No mortal or ghost is safe! Run for your lives! Attack!
The corridor floods with people, and in the chaos, Ernie Macmillan points a finger at Harry and says,
Caught in the act!
A cut to black ends sequence 2. Sequence 3 starts with the camera following Harry and Professor McGonagall as they approach the large statue that guards Dumbledore's office. And as Harry steps into the office, it's exactly what is described in the books, with whirring instruments and snoring portraits. Similar to the movies, but a little bit more detailed. I'd also like to see the pensieve in the corner, because I know this wasn't actually mentioned in the book, probably because the author hadn't actually thought of it yet. But having these little nods to some things that will become very important in later seasons will be pretty cool to see, and it's something that makes the show a little bit more unique. The rest of the scene will be pretty much exactly like the movie, with Harry trying on the sorting hat, the introduction to Fawkes, and the explanation of Phoenix abilities by Dumbledore. What we do need to focus on is Hagrid's frantic burst into the office, where he goes on to defend Harry. Obviously it is very funny, but it also showcases that blind, unwavering loyalty between Hagrid and Harry. I love this interaction by Hagrid in the book, and I really hope the show reinforces that relationship between Harry and Hagrid, as I do think that sadly kind of fizzled out towards the end of the movie series. Dumbledore reassures them both that he doesn't think Harry did anything wrong, but he does go on to ask the question, is there anything you want to tell me? The camera holds on Harry's face and we see him wrestling with it before he says no. This truly is again Harry demonstrating his loyalty. Right now, his loyalty isn't to the teachers or Dumbledore, it's to his friends Ron and Hermione. The episode then jumps into the next of Hogwarts changing motifs with the jump to Christmas, with snow falling and Christmas decorations popping up around the castle. During this motif, we will also see Harry walking around the corridors as people scatter, as if thinking he might attack them. We'll also see Fred and George following Harry, calling out,
Make way for the heir of Slytherin, seriously evil wizard coming through.
And we'll see Ginny's reaction to this as she looks sad and scared. Yet another clue. Like the movie, we then cut to the trio in the Great Hall as Hermione goes over the plan to trick Crabbe and Goyle into eating some cakes with sleeping draught, locking them in the cupboard and taking their hairs. The execution of tricking Crabbe and Goyle is also pretty much the same, because honestly it's just hilarious, and we'll see each step of the plan, including them heaving them into a nearby broom cupboard. I almost envision it like an old Laurel and Hardy sketch. The transformation scene in Myrtle's bathroom is where I really want to see some of this massive budget put to good effect with up-to-date special effects. To be honest, I do think the movies did a great job with Polyjuice Potion. However, I think we could go that one step further, make it a little darker, just to highlight the gravity of what this potion does. In short, it's both brutal and painful magic. Seeing Harry and Ron transform into Crabbe and Goyle is both exciting and honestly kind of terrifying. After the transformation, they wait for Hermione, but she tells them to go on ahead, and realizing they're wasting time, they head out of the bathroom. Disguised as Crabbe and Goyle, they awkwardly make their way through the castle, and honestly I think it's going to be a great source of physical comedy. After a failed attempt to get directions from a Ravenclaw and a meeting with a suspicious Percy, their salvation finally arrives. Malfoy himself. We follow them down a dark staircase before they arrive before a seemingly blank wall, as the music grows more and more tense. Staring at the wall, Malfoy says,
What's the new password again? Oh yeah, pure blood.
A giant snake then appears out of the floor and slithers over the wall, revealing a hidden door. Malfoy opens it and the three of them step inside. We cut to black, and the credits roll. The cold open for this episode follows a similar style to what we've had before when discussing magical creatures, using pages from the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book. This time we see an animated page of Mosty Potenty potions and the Polyjuice potion, with some incredible animations of the gruesome illustrations of people mid-transformation. The narrator gives us key information such as the ingredients, the fact that the potion wears off after an hour, and a stern instruction to never use an animal hair, as the potion is made purely for human transformations. After this, the title sequence rolls. We open following Harry and Ron disguised as Crabbe and Goyle, awkwardly lumbering after Malfoy stepping into the Slytherin common room. This is our first real look at the Slytherin common room, and the production design needs to be on point. The common room is exactly as described in the books. A long, low, underground room with rough stone walls, greenish lamps hung from chains on the ceiling, casting eerie light over everything. As Malfoy sits down, he thrusts a newspaper clipping under Ron's nose. The clipping is a Daily Prophet article, which is all about Mr. Weasley and him being fined for the flying car, as well as a direct quote from Lucius Malfoy, where he calls for Mr. Weasley's resignation and mocks his love of muggles. Malfoy is incredibly smug and cruel, saying,
Arthur Weasley loves muggles so much he should snap his wand in half and go and join them.
Then the scene shifts as Malfoy starts to speculate about the Chamber of Secrets. The tension builds and builds and builds before Malfoy says,
I wish I knew who it is.
It's a total fake out, but Harry, thinking fast, prods him for more clues. The rest of the scene plays out exactly like the movie, honestly, with Malfoy revealing the chamber was opened 50 years ago, that someone died last time, and cruelly saying that this time he hopes it's Hermione. As Ron clenches Crabbe's gigantic fists, we then see his hair starting to turn red, and his nose beginning to shorten. The Polyjuice potion is wearing off. What follows is a brilliantly chaotic, almost silent escape scene, again something similar to a Laurel and Hardy sketch. As they burst into the entrance hall, they hear the muffled banging of Crabbe and Goyle still locked in the broom cupboard. They take off their shoes and then sprint up to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom in their socks. After they gather themselves, they go to check on Hermione, but when they knock on the door, Moaning Myrtle glides out of the cubicle, looking happier than they have ever seen her. She says,
Oh, wait till you see. It's awful.
And the visual reveal here needs to be shocking and quite upsetting, I think, as the movies almost went for a comical approach. It was a cat hair that Hermione had pulled off Millicent Bulstrode's robes, and now she resembles a kind of half-human, half-cat. We then have a time jump. We'd see a montage of Hermione in the hospital wing, hidden behind curtains, and of course the moment where Ron finds a get well soon card from Lockhart under Hermione's pillow. The montage ends with Harry and Ron leaving the hospital wing one day before they suddenly hear an outcry of rage from upstairs. The camera follows them as they rapidly hurry up the stairs before they see Filch, absolutely hysterical, screaming about mopping all night as he is standing in a flooded corridor. Once Filch leaves to go and find Dumbledore, Harry and Ron wade through the corridor and into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. She's crying harder than ever, and when Harry asks what's wrong, she says that somebody threw a book at her. Then Harry notices a small, shabby black book lying on the floor, but before he can pick it up, Ron stops him. Again, justice for Ron, who is a smart character, because he goes on to explain to Harry that you can't just trust things like books in the wizarding world. He goes on this amazing rant about how different books can burn your eyes out or make you speak in limericks forever. It's a great character moment for him, once again showing his knowledge of the wizarding world and also his caution. But Harry, being Harry, ducks around him, picks it up and opens it before reading the name T.M. Riddle. Now, in episode 3, I did say that I wanted the show to include what Ron's detention was for the flying car incident, and this is where it comes into play. This was actually filmed as a deleted scene for the movie, but essentially Ron recognizes the name as T.M. Riddle won a trophy for special services to the school. However, when Harry flicks through the pages, they are completely blank, but he still pockets it. Sequence 1 ends after Hermione has been released from the hospital wing, as the three of them are sat in the Gryffindor common room before Harry shows her the diary. And now this is Hermione's moment to shine. Ron has the information about Riddle, while she has the logic.
We know T.M. Riddle got an award for special services to the school 50 years ago. Well, what if Riddle got his special award for catching the heir of Slytherin?
We cut to black to end sequence 1. Sequence 2 of the episode starts with the trio walking downstairs for breakfast, and as they round a corner into the Great Hall, the three of them freeze. It's Valentine's Day. Lockhart has completely covered the Great Hall in decorations. Heart-shaped confetti falls from the ceiling, and he has hired a dozen surly dwarves dressed as cupids to deliver singing valentines all day. Obviously, this scene was completely left out of the movie, but I really want the show to include it for a couple of reasons, really. Firstly, it provides much needed comic relief after the Polyjuice scene, and also the dark twist yet to come. And Valentine's Day also causes a major incident coming up that was also left out of the movie. We see some brief shots with a jaunty, comical soundtrack as the dwarves burst into classrooms to deliver their valentines mid-class, and kicking students on the shins as they pass them in the corridor. These scenes culminate in a corridor where a dwarf corners Harry, tackles him, rips his bag open, and delivers that valentine.
His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad. His hair is as dark as a blackboard. I wish he was mine. He's really divine. The hero who conquered the Dark Lord.
It is incredibly cringeworthy and difficult to watch. In the chaos of laughter, the books, and the spilt ink, Malfoy swoops in to grab the diary, and we see a shot of Ginny looking terrified. Obviously, at this point, we think it's because of the song, but is it? Harry is enraged and does the only thing he can think of and disarms Malfoy. The book goes flying, and Ron catches it, looking smug. Percy starts lecturing Harry about no magic in the corridors, before Malfoy leaves with a cold word to Ginny, saying,
I don't think Potter liked your Valentine much.
We then cut to that evening, with Harry heading up to his dormitory pretty early, mainly to avoid Fred and George, who keep singing that song. Just like in the movie, we then get the short scene of Harry having a written conversation with Riddle from the diary. Riddle says that he can show him information from 50 years ago about the Chamber of Secrets. Harry writes okay, and the diary becomes a portal. I do like what the Chamber of Secrets movie did with this moment, however, this is where I think the HBO show can get a little bit more creative. I want to see the diary's pages becoming a swirling, colourful vortex, the camera pulling Harry and us into the book, with practical effects making it all feel real and disorienting. The memory scene will be pretty much identical to the movie. The only real change is that it's with Professor Dippet that Riddle has his conversation about the school remaining open if the attacker is apprehended. Obviously, in the movie, he had this conversation with a young Dumbledore, but again, this is just a small change that will make the series feel a bit more unique, whilst also expanding the wizarding world. After his conversation with Dippet, Riddle heads down to the dungeons to find Hagrid, and we see Aragog's escape, and Riddle trying to pin the attacks on Hagrid. Harry is then thrown back onto his bed in the present, just as Ron walks in. Harry looks up at Ron and says,
Hagrid opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago.
We cut to black to end sequence 2. Sequence 3 opens with the trio sitting in the deserted common room as they discuss what Harry has just witnessed, and they decide to not confront Hagrid just yet as the attacks seem to have stopped. We then get our next Hogwarts changing motif, seeing the change from winter into spring, as the leaves start to become green and the snow starts to melt. The montage should also include the shifting mood change at Hogwarts. Firstly, we see the mandrakes having a raucous party in the greenhouses, and Ernie Macmillan politely passing Harry a bucket in herbology, and Peeves finally getting bored of his song. This breather also allows us to cover a classic Hogwarts milestone, choosing third-year subjects. I've included this for two reasons really. Firstly, it's essential world building, which makes Hogwarts feel like a real school. And secondly, it's a moment of normalcy, which makes the upcoming horror even more impactful. The cinematography should also be warm and bright, lulling the audience and the characters into a false sense of security. This all shatters when we cut to Harry entering his dormitory to find it ransacked. The camera follows Harry's gaze as it pans across the destruction before he says,
"Riddle's diary's gone."
We then cut to the next day for the Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, and we'll see a pretty major contrast here. The sun is shining, Wood is euphoric, and the Great Hall is buzzing. But Harry is paranoid, scanning the Great Hall for the thief. Then, as they head outside, it happens again. Harry hears that sinister voice. But this time, Hermione's reaction is different.
"I think I've just understood something. I've got to go to the library."
Perplexed, Harry and Ron head down on their own to the Quidditch pitch, and we'll see some pretty quick shots of Harry pulling on his robes, sitting through Wood's team talk, and the team walking out onto the pitch. Then we see Professor McGonagall marching across the pitch with a megaphone in hand. The music completely cuts out and the excited crowd start to murmur. McGonagall says on the megaphone that the match has been cancelled before approaching Harry, and when she sees Ron coming across the pitch, she tells both of them to follow her. McGonagall leads them not to her office but to the hospital wing as she tells them there has been a double attack. The door opens as we see a Ravenclaw girl petrified, and then the camera slowly pans to the bed next to her. It's Hermione. The music drops out completely. We hold on Hermione's frozen, terrified face before we cut to black and the credits silently roll. Our cold open for this episode is the final one that focuses on the point of view from a victim of one of the attacks. We see Hermione in the library frantically scanning an unseen book before her eyes widen with shock as she understands something. She then rips a page out of the book, scrunches it in her hand, and goes to leave the library. As Hermione is leaving, she asks a Ravenclaw girl to borrow her mirror, and as she does so, she tells her to follow. As they slowly round a corner, the camera focuses on the mirror in a tight shot. We suddenly see the flash of a bright yellow eye before we cut to black and the title sequence rolls. We open with the camera tight on Professor McGonagall's face, and as the camera zooms out, we see that she is holding a piece of parchment standing in the Gryffindor common room. McGonagall goes on to explain the new security measures. Every class will be escorted to their next lesson by a teacher, there will be no unauthorized bathroom breaks, and finally, the school might have to close. The first key difference in this episode from what we saw in the movie is after McGonagall leaves and Lee Jordan shouts,
"Why don't they just chuck all the Slytherins out?"
and the crowd erupts. Once again, I know I keep saying this, but including these moments with other students just makes Hogwarts seem more real and relatable. The movies often acted like it was just the trio who were impacted by certain events. However, this moment shows that the whole school is affected. We cut to the dead of night with Harry and Ron sneaking down to Hagrid's underneath the invisibility cloak. The following scene in Hagrid's hut will be pretty much identical to the movie. I honestly don't really know what they can change here, as all of the actors in the movies did a phenomenal job, and I think the actors in this scene will do the same. But to sum it up, Harry and Ron, whilst under the invisibility cloak, witness the meeting between Hagrid, Dumbledore, Lucius Malfoy, and Cornelius Fudge. Fudge is here to arrest Hagrid, and Malfoy is here to give Dumbledore a letter of dismissal. What is different is the following scene, as in the movie, Harry and Ron go straight into the Forbidden Forest. However, this time, we will see the next day at Hogwarts. The colour palette, and therefore the school, seems much gloomier now that Dumbledore has gone. We then cut to Herbology, and firstly we'll see Ernie Macmillan in a great character moment, formally apologising to Harry for suspecting him. And then Harry sees a stream of spiders, moving in a perfectly straight line toward the Forbidden Forest. Harry leans over to Ron and whispers that they will follow the spiders that night. The sequence culminates with them under the invisibility cloak again, sneaking out of the castle, firstly to Hagrid's hut to collect Fang, and then down to the Forbidden Forest. Harry casts Lumos, illuminating the entrance to the forest, and we cut to black to end sequence 1. Before we jump into sequence 2, I just wanted to point out that while sequence 2 is mainly going to focus on Harry and Ron's adventure in the Forbidden Forest and Aragog, this doesn't mean that the sequence is necessarily going to be really short. The show can combat this by fleshing out certain action sequences and also fleshing out the Forbidden Forest in general, seeing a variety of different creatures and objects. So sequence 2 starts with Harry and Ron walking through the Forbidden Forest, following the trail of spiders. As they go deeper, the trees grow more gnarled and twisted, and then in the periphery, we will see something moving. We then catch a glimpse of a herd of centaurs, silently watching them from the shadows. Obviously, we don't see this in the movie, and we don't even see this in the book, but again, kind of like with the Pensieve, it's a little change and a little addition that makes the whole world seem much more alive. As I mentioned in the previous season, I really like centaur lore, and I really want the show to make sure they have a prominent part to play in the series as a whole. And this inclusion is just a reminder that the forest is full of different things that don't really care about their specific problems, and it perfectly sets up the centaurs to have a bigger part to play throughout the seasons. The tension keeps building and building before Fang starts to lose it, barking his head off. And as Ron starts to have a massive full-blown panic attack, Mr. Weasley's car emerges in front of them. It's a fantastic and weird moment that completely makes you forget about the terror that's currently going on all around them. But then Harry realizes that they have lost the trail of spiders, and as he's about to say that they need to find them again, we see the colour drain from Ron's face. We start to hear a steady clicking before 1 second they're standing there, and the next second they're being swept up and carried away upside down. And the camera should swing wildly, completely disorienting them and us in a haze of hairy legs. The actual conversation with Aragog in his lair is very similar to the movie, and visually it will be very similar too. I think the movie did an excellent job with this scene, especially as so many of the spiders were practical effects. And as the showrunners have already said, the TV series is also going to try and rely a lot on practical effects. We then get the massive info dump. Hagrid is innocent, the girl who died was found in a bathroom, and the monster is something that spiders fear. Then,
Goodbye, friend of Hagrid.
The clicking gets insane as a wall of spiders advance. Harry goes for his wand, knowing it's hopeless, before we hear a horn blare out of the trees. Once again, the next action segment will be very similar to what we got in the movie, but again, they can just flesh it out a little bit more as they have more time. After the frantic escape, the car dumps them near Hagrid's hut, before reversing back into the Forbidden Forest, and Ron, unable to contain himself, is violently sick in the pumpkin patch. We then cut to the dormitory with Harry and Ron in bed, but Harry can't sleep, and then it hits him. He sits bolt upright and says,
That girl who died, Aragog said she was found in a bathroom. What if she never left the bathroom?
Ron rubs his eyes before they widen with shock.
You don't think? Not Moaning Myrtle.
We cut to black to end Sequence 2. We start Sequence 3 with our final Hogwarts changing motif, highlighting the transition from spring to an approaching summer. We then cut to Transfiguration, where we will see Professor McGonagall telling the Gryffindors that the exams are due to take place in a few weeks. This is a key moment for McGonagall, as it shows that she is following Dumbledore's instructions to keep a normality to life at Hogwarts despite the dire threats. It also grounds the story. Even with a monster on the loose, the students still have to sit their exams. McGonagall also makes another announcement that the Mandrakes are ready and that soon they will be stewed so they can bring all of the petrified people back. We then cut to Harry and Ron heading down to the Great Hall, and Ron tells Harry happily that they don't need to go and speak to Myrtle anymore because once Hermione is back, she will have all of the details about who attacked her. Once they arrive in the Great Hall, this is when Ginny Weasley approaches them, and this scene was left out completely from the movies. However, I think it's a really important moment to include for Ginny's character, as even though she is being possessed, sorry for the slight spoiler, she still wants to do the right thing. She says that she needs to tell them something important, but she struggles to get the words out, and eventually Percy comes and interrupts her at the worst possible moment, causing Ginny to flee. When Ron angrily tells Percy that Ginny was about to tell them something important, Percy chokes on his tea as he says that it was because she walked in on him doing something that he would rather not talk about. Here again is the Chamber of Secrets being a great whodunit, as this is an excellent red herring that again just enhances the mystery and also makes his interruption even more frustrating. We cut to the Gryffindors being escorted to History of Magic by Lockhart, and Harry seizes his moment. He begins to flatter Lockhart, and eventually him and Ron convince them that he can go off to prepare for his next class, leaving the class to get to History of Magic alone. The pair of them dart towards Myrtle's bathroom, but on their way, they are accosted by Professor McGonagall, and we see another great character moment for her. Harry quickly lies that they were going to visit Hermione in the hospital wing, and it works. McGonagall's stern facade cracks, and she gives them permission. So within a few scenes of each other, we've seen a few different sides of McGonagall. We've seen her sterner side when it comes to her exams, her leadership when it comes to the Mandrakes, and also her more emotional side when it comes to being touched by Harry and Ron wanting to visit Hermione. I really think this is important because whilst Maggie Smith's performance of McGonagall was iconic, once again the show has the chance to expand some of these characters even more than what we saw in the movies. When Harry and Ron get to the hospital wing, they sit next to Hermione, and Harry notices a piece of paper scrunched up in Hermione's hand. In the movie, it's Harry that reads the page. However, once again, this time, Newt Scamander is going to narrate the page, which will be brilliantly animated. And as he reads about the Basilisk's abilities and weaknesses, we will also see some flashbacks from earlier on in the season, which highlight how Harry and Ron are now starting to make the connections. Firstly, its gaze is fatal. However, Colin saw it through his camera, Justin through Nearly Headless Nick, and Hermione with the mirror. The crow of the rooster is fatal to it, which is why Harry saw Hagrid holding some dead roosters when he went to visit Dumbledore. Spiders flee before it, which explains the trails into the forest. And at the bottom of the page, Hermione had written pipes, explaining why Harry has been hearing the voice coming from the walls. Harry and Ron finally go on to piece together the fact that the Chamber of Secrets entrance must be in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The next thing we know, the camera is frantically following them as they burst down corridors, up staircases and around corners, with Harry saying that they need to get to the staff room to tell McGonagall what they know. However, once they arrive in the staff room, it's empty, so they decide to wait. Then we hear McGonagall's voice magically echoed throughout the school, telling all students to go back to their common rooms and all of the staff to meet in the staff room. Harry and Ron quickly hide in a wardrobe full of teachers' cloaks just as the staff all arrive. McGonagall then delivers the news.
A student has been taken by the monster, right into the chamber itself.
She goes on to say that the heir of Slytherin left another message.
Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever.
Professor Sprout asks which student has been taken, and McGonagall says,
Ginny Weasley.
The camera focuses on Harry's dumbstruck face before moving slowly to Ron, who slides down helplessly to the floor. We cut to black, and the credits roll. Now, in the previous episode, I said that the style of cold open, where we would see the attacks from the victim's perspective, was the final one. However, what I meant to say was, it was the final one in the present. We open in a bathroom with a muted and faded colour palette, which would suggest that this is in the past. Suddenly, a bespectacled girl bursts into the bathroom in tears and barricades herself in a cubicle. As she's crying on the toilet seat, she suddenly hears an odd whisper. Furiously, she stands up, pushes the door open, and goes to tell the voice to go away. But as she rounds the corner, she sees a giant pair of yellow eyes. Suddenly, she slumps to the ground, dead. We cut to black, and the title sequence rolls. We open in the same closet that we ended the last episode in, with Harry and Ron hiding, watching the teachers in the staff room. The staff room door then bangs open, and in walks Gilderoy Lockhart, beaming at everybody, completely oblivious to what is going on. The camera slowly pans across the faces of all of the teachers. McGonagall's nostrils are flared, Snape looks like he's been punched in the face, and Sprout and Flitwick just look exhausted. Snape then steps forward and says,
Just the man. Your moment has come at last.
We see the colour drain from Lockhart's face as the other teachers quote his own boasts back at him and sending him off on a mission that he doesn't want. In the movie, it was only McGonagall and Snape who did this. However, I think it's really important character development for all of the teachers to be involved here. It shows their unity, their intelligence, and their sheer fury at this utter fraud who's been doing nothing all year and is doing nothing now to protect the students. The camera holds on Lockhart's face as he looks weak and pathetic before slinking out of the room. And once he's left, McGonagall barks out her orders for how to evacuate the school. We then cut to the Gryffindor common room, and this is where the show can really amplify the emotions that were in the book. The room is packed but completely silent, and we see Harry, Ron, Fred, George, and Percy all sitting in a corner looking devastated. And the camera lingers on each of the Weasleys just to show this complete devastation. Harry and Ron go on to have a whispered conversation where they decide that their only option is to go and tell Lockhart everything they know about the Chamber of Secrets. The camera then follows them as they leave the common room, and nobody tries to stop them as everyone's just looking too shocked and too pitiful of Ron to even say anything. The walk to Lockhart's office is tense through a deserted castle, and when they arrive at Lockhart's office, they hear scrapes and hurried footsteps echoing in the room. The rest of the scene will be very similar to the movie, as once again Kenneth Branagh did a phenomenal job at explaining Lockhart's fraudulent activities through his monologue. Essentially, he'd been stealing other wizards' adventures and claiming them as his own. The main difference will be when Lockhart goes to erase their memories, Harry will use Expelliarmus, blasting Lockhart back and his wand into the air, which Ron catches and throws out of the window. This is a massive payoff, as Snape taught them this spell during the Dueling Club. Something that is quite easy to miss when you're reading the books is that Harry actually learnt a lot from Snape, and this is one of the first examples of it. To be honest, the rest of this whole sequence plays out pretty much identically to the movie. Harry and Ron march Lockhart to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and when they arrive, Harry asks Moaning Myrtle about how she died, and she gleefully recounts the events. As Myrtle speaks, we'll see flashes of the cold open again. The girl crying, a voice hissing, and bright yellow eyes next to a sink. We cut back to Harry finding the snake engraving on a tap, and after a couple of attempts, he manages to speak Parseltongue. The sink grinds away, revealing a vast, slimy pipe. Harry immediately says he's going down, and Ron, despite his fear, says he'll go too. They force the terrified Lockhart to go first, and afterwards each boy slide down the slimy pipe. We cut to black to end sequence 1. Sequence 2 opens with Harry, Ron and Lockhart zooming down the slimy pipe before bursting out into an underground tunnel, and then they see a giant Basilisk shed skin. It is a horrifying sight, way more than in the movie, and it really underscores the danger. In a final cowardly act like in the movie, Lockhart seizes Ron's broken wand, attempts to obliviate them, the spell backfires, and it causes a cave-in that separates Harry from Ron and the now memory-addled Lockhart. With a wall of solid rock between them, Ron still manages to say that they're okay, and Harry makes the heroic choice to go on alone. He continues down the tunnel until he finds a door sealed with intertwined stone serpents. He speaks one last Parseltongue command to open, and the door slides apart. Harry steps inside and finds himself in a massive yet eerily lit chamber, even bigger and more spooky than the movie. He moves forward through the vast serpent-filled chamber before he finds Ginny, cold and lifeless, at the base of Slytherin's statue. As Harry tries to rouse her, Tom Riddle emerges from the shadows. And this is where HBO can do something a little bit different and more unique from the movie. Essentially, show, not just tell. When Riddle reveals that Ginny was controlled into opening the chamber, I don't want to just see him monologuing. I think again we could use some flashbacks to make it a lot more visceral. We'd see quick glimpses of Ginny hunched under her covers while she writes in the diary. We'd see her hand painting the messages on the wall. And we'd see her waking up covered in rooster feathers, utterly confused and terrified. These visual cues are crucial as they tie together all of the clues we've got throughout the season. Her pale complexion, her avoidance, and her fear. It basically turns a villain's speech into a tragic revelation, and Ginny's story is crucial character development and the start of a major arc for her. The conversation then moves on to how Riddle framed Hagrid, and this then really underscores the rivalry between Dumbledore and Voldemort. Sequence 2 then ends with the massive twist of this season. Using Harry's wand, Riddle writes his name in the air. Then with a flick of the wand, the fiery letters rearranged, and we are introduced again to the most dangerous dark wizard of all time.
I am Lord Voldemort.
This moment needs to be chilling, slow, and iconic, as I do think the movies rushed it ever so slightly. The show needs to let it hang in the air before we see the shock on Harry's face. We then cut to black to end sequence 2. Sequence 3 is where HBO can really go all out with their budget. The film did a great job with the Basilisk action scene in my opinion, but it was over pretty quickly. With a longer runtime and a higher budget, the show can really make this whole Basilisk sequence seem much more terrifying and cinematic. And with the darker rating that I have discussed in a past video, the show can also lean into moments that are filled with more horror and potentially a little bit of gore. The sequence picks up with Tom Riddle about to strike, before the music starts. The Phoenix song needs to be a fully composed score here. Fawkes' arrival should be a moment of pure magic, with flames erupting as it bursts into the chamber carrying the sorting hat. Riddle's laughter echoes through the chamber as he hisses his command, and the reveal of the Basilisk should be horrifying. The ensuing fight is a chaotic game of cat and mouse. Again, something akin to a horror movie. Fawkes' role is also expanded. His aerial battle with the Basilisk is a brilliant moment with flashes of red and gold against green. The blinding of the Basilisk should also be a pretty visceral moment, again with this TV-14 rating, with a spray of dark blood as the serpent thrashes around. We then have the moment with the sorting hat, which again is a little bit different from the movie as Harry slams it on his head, asks for help, and then the weight of the sword comes crashing down on his skull. The final moments of the battle are similar to the movie, however, I don't think we need to include Harry climbing on top of the statue. Harry drives the sword home, but not before he feels a fang piercing his arm. The editing will be done in such a way that we almost feel the searing pain, his vision fading, and the chamber dissolving. The camera then blinks back into life as we see Fawkes healing Harry with his tears. As Riddle raises the wand for the final time, Fawkes soars back overhead and drops the diary into Harry's lap. Harry seizes the broken basilisk fang and plunges it into the book's heart. Ink spurts out in torrents, and Riddle screams and violently thrashes around before vanishing as the memory of him is violently erased from existence. Then we hear a moan as Ginny wakes up, and this moment between Harry and Ginny is crucial to include, and properly so, as again it will just really form a good foundation for their upcoming relationship. The escape from the chamber is next, as Fawkes leads Harry and Ginny through the tunnel back to Ron. They also find Lockhart, who is completely addled at this point, and Fawkes provides their escape. Sequence 3 ends as they emerge into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom for some much needed levity, before they follow Fawkes down a deserted corridor towards the headmaster's office, and as they arrive at the door, Harry knocks 3 times. We cut to black to end sequence 3. Sequence 3 opens with the reunion in Dumbledore's office as Mr. and Mrs. Weasley are waiting in there. Dumbledore's calmness tells us that he never lost faith, and he immediately jumps to the defense of Ginny. It's a really great way of highlighting Dumbledore's kind nature. He publicly reframes the narrative from guilty girl to Voldemort's victim, which simultaneously protects both Ginny and her family, as well as exposing the real enemy's secret. Then there's the moment of Gilderoy Lockhart standing vacantly in the corner. This moment is pretty funny, especially when Dumbledore says that Lockhart was impaled by his own sword, to which Lockhart says,
"Sword? Haven't got a sword. That boy has, though."
But it is also a perfect thematic counterpoint to Harry's journey. Harry won through self-sacrifice and authenticity, whilst Lockhart was destroyed by his own vanity and fraudulence. Once the Weasleys and Lockhart leave, the following conversation between Harry and Dumbledore is pretty much identical to the movie, with Harry being worried that he is similar to Voldemort, and Dumbledore dropping the iconic line,
"It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities."
Just like in the movie, Lucius Malfoy then storms into Dumbledore's office, furious to find Dumbledore reinstated as headmaster. We then get the reveal of Dobby belonging to the Malfoys as he trails behind Lucius. Dumbledore reveals that he knows Lucius threatened the school governors and proceeds to show him the diary, explaining how Voldemort used it to possess Ginny. As they speak, Dobby desperately signals to Harry that Lucius planted the diary, but when Harry confronts him about it, Lucius says that he has to prove it. One small difference from the movie is that when Lucius leaves, instead of Harry putting a sock in the diary, he puts the diary in the sock. I know it's a small moment, but again, just these little changes make it a little bit more unique. He catches up with Lucius and shoves it into his hands. He then rips off the sock and tosses it to Dobby. Dobby catches it and gains his freedom. Lucius then tries to attack Harry, but Dobby magically defends him, throwing him down a flight of stairs, and after he leaves, Dobby says a word of tearful thanks before vanishing as well. Yet again, just like the movie, the following scene is the feast, which features the petrified victims being revived, the return of Hagrid, and Gryffindor winning the House Cup. The final scene of the episode will be a nice cheery one. On the Hogwarts Express home, Harry, Ron, Hermione and the Weasleys enjoy their final hours of permitted magic by playing games, setting off fireworks and practicing spells. As they near King's Cross Station, Harry asks Ginny about the secret that she was going to tell them the other day. Ginny reveals that Percy has been secretly dating Penelope Clearwater from Ravenclaw, a fact that Fred and George delight in discovering. Finally, Harry writes down his phone number and gives a copy to Ron and Hermione, asking them to call him over the summer. We cut to black to end the episode on a lovely note. However, similar to Season 1, we are going to end Season 2 with a little hint as to what Harry will have to face next year, as it's a nice cliffhanger that will keep fans eager to come back for the next season. We cut to the ocean in the middle of a giant storm, and for a while all we can see is waves being churned this way and that. All of a sudden, however, a large structure looms out of the distance, and as we draw closer, we see it is a huge building perched on a rock. The camera jumps to the interior of the building, which turns out to be a prison. The camera moves past prison cells completely full of inmates, some shouting, some muttering, and some simply slumped on the floor. As we approach the end of the corridor, we focus on a specific cell, and as we spin around, we see it is completely empty, with nothing but an old newspaper lying on the floor. We cut to black and the credits roll. So that's my complete plan for Season 2 of Harry Potter on HBO. I've massively enjoyed doing this season, maybe even more than Season 1, but Season 3 is coming up very soon, and Prisoner of Azkaban might honestly be my favourite book, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. As always, please put down any suggestions for things that I missed or things you would like to see down in the comments for this season and for any other future seasons. And once again, remember to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and hit the notification bell so you are notified when I bring out Harry Potter Season 3.